Awesome. So welcome to our wealth matrix. This probably won't be as long a one tonight. Well, that's often famous last words. Let's see how we go. So what we're talking today is about a plan B. And it's not going to be many slides for once. And I'm just going to have one slide I'll be showing at the right time. So very simply, I think we'd all would agree that right now, things are looking decidedly dodgy in the world. And who here, if they're honest, the whole thing really worries them and they're often awake at night or just really deep down bugs you. Just type me or Y or something if that's you. You're really deep down, it bugs you, it bothers you. You don't get a good feeling about it all. It worries you. And if you are that way, well, you're actually having the courage to be honest, because I think a lot of people are. And I think that it's a very common thing for people to deny how they're really feeling. We live in a society where to express how you feel gets judged, gets put down, and yeah, Kathy, concerned. Yeah, so generally a lot of people are concerned. I've noticed it's natural for people to deny. I have a personal view, for example, that many people who claim but they didn't have a reaction to the jab, they did. They just don't want to admit it. And I've been proving that and finding it to be very true when I actually talk to these people more deeply and they admit they did. And they just don't want to admit it to themselves or others. And that's what I want to talk about today, just how much I think this does bother people and the actual reality of where this can head. There's certain situations where things should bother people that really shouldn't. And there's certain things that they don't bother people, but they really should. And I'm going to start with a bit of a story. It was actually a true story that my cousin years ago said in church that I was in. There was a couple driving one night in America on a road. It was pouring with rain. It was a very kind of dark, it was quite dark, and they really were out in the middle of nowhere. And they couldn't hardly see ahead because of the fog, because of the dark. As they were coming up closer, they saw a guy in front of him literally going off his absolute bananas. He was waving at them, screaming at them, running around with his face full of like absolute all kinds of stuff. And the couple, what would I have done? Well, the first thing I would do is go, oh my gosh, I've got to get around this guy. He's a psycho, man. He's going to do something to me. And so they were trying to get around him, but because the road was quite narrow, it was all bush on the side, they couldn't get around this guy. This guy was running, doing everything possible to stop them passing him. And in the end, they had no choice but to stop. And they stopped, very worried. They wound down the window slightly. And they couldn't quite hear what he was saying at first. So they wound down a little bit more. And then the words they heard chilled them to the bone. The bridge is out. The bridge is out. And when they went up further, 50 meters there, the bridge was gone. They would have driven straight over into a ravine and instantly died. They never would have seen it coming because of the fog. So what do? They put their car in a way and did the same thing, yelling the bridge is out and waving for anyone who came by. And it's a powerful story, I'm sure you would agree, and it's actually happened. And sometimes you see something coming up and people just don't really listen. And people get very afraid of things they don't need to get afraid. Like, what does Aunt Mary think at the family gathering? Did that person like my picture on the Instagram that I put the other day? When my breast showing too much in that photo, or for a guy, like, oh, I've got a bit of a belly. There's all kinds of stuff that we worry about that really aren't very important. And then there's things that we don't worry about that much, which we actually should, because concern can lead to action. Worry can do one of two things. It can eat you up inside, or it can lead you to serious, severe action. And what I found now is I have a simple rule. If something's bothering me, I'll always take some action. Always. Like like instantly. Anything that will give me feel a little bit better about what I'm doing in the situation. And the reality is right now, when you've got governments who for years have been passing laws, bringing in draconian, outrageous taxes, milking the people like cows, passing more draconian laws to confiscate wealth, taking billionaires' assets for the sake of it because they got a country they don't like, as predicted by the book, The Sovereign Individual, and they're not giving a rat's ass how it affects their employees, their others, and many employees now aren't getting their pay. Ultimately, the billionaires have got a plan B, but the average person gets hurt in what's going on. And the reality is, whether you like it or not, as Morpheus said in the Matrix, for many of you, you are a slave, and it's not a good feeling to be. So let's just have a look at this diagram, so to speak, that we have here right now. So this is really the only slide I'll be showing tonight about how the Matrix works in a very simplistic form. So you got the 1% at the very top, who basically by and large control the system. You know, they run it, they control it. There's a further elite within them, but by and large, these are the people that are super rich. They're in that whole kind of thing. They create the system, they own a system, and things like that. Within them, there's probably some of the oligarchs, the billionaires, and various others. And then, of course, every now and again, they have a little cat fights, and like Russia now is on the bad books. So their billionaires are now getting punished, and of course, anything associated with them. And as you can see, it's all very random. When you live in a very corrupt, evil society that literally has absolutely lost its way. And lately, my newest profession is what I call absolutely like total aggressive Facebook trolling. It's been a lot of fun. I write the most appalling posts I can possibly get away with, and it's a lot of fun. I mean, just to see what happens. And, you know, I wrote one the other day when I said, people say about Australia, if we're still living in a convict colony, I disagree. Australia has now morphed into a lunatic asylum for the mentally incarcerate, for incarcerate the mentally insane. And that went very, very well. I wrote another post as well where I put, for those who believe in coercing people to have experimental, you know, needles in them, I hope a cockroach crawls up your ass and shits in your colon. And I'm just doing stuff like that. Like, it's inappropriate, because my aim is to do what that guy did on the bridge. I want to wake people up, absolutely wake people up to their insanity. And yeah, gentlemen, love, just write the most appalling stuff I can possibly write and just insult anyone who I consider an idiot. That's kind of where I'm at the moment. And the reason why is very simple. There is, right now, let's just face the facts. The last 2 and a bit years, 3 years ago, you had some young chick from Sweden running around saying, how dare you, telling everyone what to do about that, and about climate and about planes and shit like that. Then you've got now boys being able to have a safe space going into the girls' toilets. Women's sports now being taken over by guys who wake up one day and said, I want to be a woman. No, I don't want to go through the pain of getting my dick chopped off, and I just want to basically go ahead and just call myself a woman. And that's now going on in the world, okay? And then, of course, what's going on in the world is they shut the world down for the flu. They put a piece of cloth on everyone's face. People running around screaming blue murder if you don't wear your piece of cloth. And they fine you and they incarcerate you and do all kinds of stuff. Now, if someone had told you 10 years ago that this would happen, how many of you would have thought I was an absolute conspiracy nut job who needed to be put in an insane asylum and basically put down? Yeah, most of you would have thought that. You would have thought basically that I was an absolute moron. And but the reality is we're actually seeing it. They shut the world down for the flu. And then goodness knows how they created that flu and stuff like that. And that's why I'm starting to, the reality is the message that we share at the Global Wealth Club, what I share, isn't for everyone, because the majority of people fall right within this indoctrinated area, and they really, or here, and they really just want to stay comfortable. That is why I had no doubt, and I always argued with people who disagree, that 80% of the population was going to get jabbed. And I said, because I said, this group's going to get it, because they have to get looked after by this group. This group will get it as well. This group will rant and rave and be pretty pissed off about it, but they'll end up doing it. And some of this will end up doing it just because they can't handle the pressure. It's all too hard, and they just want to do it. So purely on statistics, I had never had much doubt that 80% would do it. And of course, that's what's by and large happened overall. So David says, 3 years ago, walking into a bank asking for money from Muscom, I would have been arrested for sure. It's so true, isn't it? I remember early on in the whole thing, I actually put on a bush ranger's mask, looking like a bandit, and deliberately walked into a service station, and they didn't know what to do. They pissed themselves laughing, and they looked very shocked at the same time, you know. So, but yeah, in all seriousness, we laugh about it, but at the end of the day, if you've got that going on, what's next? I mean, what's next? Like, if they can shut the world down for the flu, stop people flying to different places, have every country almost just about on board with the whole shit, and then got people getting caught up with it and then enforcing it, And then now, as Stephen Pettit spoke last night with Grace, you got this new e-cash bill, which is happening. In America, they're trying to push through. Whether it passes or not, it shows you the move to get rid of cash is beginning. They're starting to do it, to move in the digital e-currency. Now, all well and good if digital currency is smooth and integrity, but we all know the aim is just simply to get everyone so that you can't get rid of taxes, you can't get away from anything. So this is serious stuff. And really, it's about getting a plan B to be absolutely out of this thing. Because the awake 20% are those who know that the system is stuffed. And the fact is, all of you on this webinar, you pretty much, most of you are likely to be on here. You know, there's going to be some of you in there, but the vast majority are going to be in here. You know, well done for basically stepping into this and actually listening to me carrying on and insulting and doing that. That's a good sign. It means that you're willing to do what it takes. I still remember years ago hearing a great message in church. Now, obviously, I don't exactly necessarily agree with everything in the way they said this, but I more want to give you the metaphor. This bikie preacher who got up at a large church, he gets on the stage, and keep in mind in churches, swearing on church pulpits is a big no-no. And he got up and he looked at everyone and he said, you know what chits me off about coming to a church? And you could just see the absolute look of horror on the pastors' faces, on the people's faces. And he said, you know what really shits me off and gets right up my nose and just fucks me right off with everything? He said, all of you are more concerned with the fact that I just swore my lungs off than the fact that right now the church is making very little difference in people's spiritual well-being. And that kind of shut everyone up really quickly. So in other words, he wanted to make a point. That's often why I do that. I mean, I often carry on, I'll do shit like that because I want to get rid of the idiots, quick, smart, because I want to talk to the awake and say, it's time just to really put your things in place. Like put your plan B, assume worst case scenario and get things in place. And that's what the elite are doing. There's a good reason that Donald Trump, Mitt Romney, the politician, Malcolm Turnbull, Biden, Obama, and all these people are buying farmland. They're setting up in islands. They're getting second, third, fourth, fifth passports. They've got plan Bs everywhere. These Russian oligarchs had lots of plan Bs, plan Cs, and plan Ds. And that's why, although they've been hurt by these sanctions, they haven't woken up one day, they can't eat, they've got no food, they've got nothing. It just means they've lost their model girlfriend, possibly. They can't get on their favorite yacht. They've had to get on their second yacht and things like that. But of course, inevitably, their businesses and employ people and lots of people and things like that, they get hurt. So this reset that supposedly will target that will ultimately hit very hard in this tier. It's very important, that way of life. And we've seen that with the pandemic and what's happened. So hence why we're going to be doing, while we're really going to be upping our teaching on things like having an escape plan, a second passport or citizenship. Yeah, by all means, you don't necessarily mean you're going to run away and hide in the desert, but you want to have that option. I'm sure the Russian oligarchs are very glad that they had their options ready to go when this all happened. I'm sure you all would agree with me on that. I'm in the process, like I've just picked up my new car today. I'm so excited, like my 4-wheel drive. It's like a really good one. And you're talking about someone who's absolutely horrendous about cars, you know, to get, that's part of my plan B, to get that camper trailer to be able to get out and about. So what does that really mean in terms of things like that? So practically being in T2 just simply means you have a job, you have assets that are very much like locked into the current system, like just about all of it. So for example, let's say all your money's in cash in the stock market or your super fund. If the government then resets everything or the super funds crash, you're fucked. You're in a big lot of trouble. Robert Kiyosaki in Second Chance predicts that many in this tier 2 who've got super funds, retirement incomes, and things like that are going to be caught out because you've got a very fixed mentality as to about in terms of your money. The other ones who are going to be in a fair bit of trouble are those who've like got a lot of property, and let's say that for whatever reason the governments just simply start stealing or saying, bringing in certain stricter laws, unless you've complied, got your jab, you've got your whatever else, you can't basically do certain things to your property or access certain things. You know, this is what a totalitarian autocratic society looks like. So let's just say that worst case scenario, Australia just resets everything, like absolutely everything. And you got all your wealth in Australia. Well, again, you're pretty much screwed. So how does it look to get out of it? There's a few important things to realize. Number one, it's as Stephen says, it's unlikely that every single thing in the world at the same time is going to go a certain direction. And even with Australia, it's not very likely that everything will kind of be reset. But in saying that, imagine if they did get rid of cash, reset the currency, and made participation in the new system dependent upon certain things. For many people, you're very vulnerable. So what does a plan B look like? Number one, it's about protecting your wealth to have peace of mind, to be safe at night, and having that money sitting in, say, not only Australian banks, but possibly offshore banks spread across various banks, having money in precious metals, not just in Australia, but overseas, so that if Australia sees as gold, you got something overseas or vice versa. Having money in shares internationally, Australia, things like that, having private equity, getting into the crypto, which my view is, and I'm not saying I'm right in this, but I see cryptos as, you know, once the government increased regulation, I'm expecting a big move in that, because most people are scared of crypto regulation. I think it will bring a big move because all the big countries will get comfortable in it. Keep in mind that Bitcoin and cryptos were made for a world like this. That's why Russia have been talking about accepting Bitcoin and set the price up. Imagine if more and more countries started doing that or moving into cryptos. So if you don't at least know crypto, I'm not saying that crypto is going to necessarily work because I don't have that crystal ball, but I can tell you that there's a very good chance that if we're going to digital e-currency, that cryptos have got a big part to play. The Sovereign Individual in 995 book predicts that. So if you're not learning and mastering that area and knowing how to do it safely and wisely, you're not only missing out on ways to secure your wealth and protect it, so that if they grab other forms of your wealth, you got forms of your wealth that are maybe gone up even a lot more, but you're missing out on opportunities to get some of the best returns you may ever see in your life. Now, I say that very guardedly because we're not licensed financial advisors. We can't basically, you know, promote returns, and nor do we want to, but there's a safe way to get the balance of a balanced investment, wise, carefully constructed portfolio, and getting the understanding to avoid what I call the crypto scammers, the scammers in the financial area, and actually learn to create sovereign incomes. I mean, who here right now would know you'd be a lot more comfortable if you had some sovereign residual incomes that meant you weren't vulnerable to your employer, your job, or anyone? Who would have loved to have had that the last couple of years? Yeah, a lot of you, that's right. So yeah, absolutely. So that's the thing. So part of the matrix as well is mastering those skills. Imagine if you knew without a shadow of a doubt that in 12 months' time, they were going to stop the whole system and take everything. I've no doubt that you all would probably move a lot faster than you're moving. Keep in mind that is a big, large possibility that could actually happen. So you really want to be learning and mastering ways of doing it. You want to have that relentless edge that pushes yourself harder and further and quicker than ever before. One of the things that, for me, I will openly tell you, I found that the transition very hard. I was trained to be a bitch from when I was young. I went to university, accountant, lawyer, financial planner. The first time I heard Rich Dad Poor Dad when I was like literally 31, I thought I am so screwed because I was totally trained to think like an employee. So I invested large amounts of money in the best mentoring, the best processes over the next number of years to master this kind of stuff. I can remember one mentor alone, I was spending $5,000 a month, US dollars, just to master this kind of stuff. To this day, the best money I ever spent. Because at the end of the day, if you want to make that shift from here, you've got to learn how money flows, for example, in this tier, you know, and learn how everything works together. So for example, the tier 2, it's very important as to what happens. So the way the money flow happens here is that this system here funds everything else. That is why this tier pays large taxes, because this tier over here funds all these people down here. They take the money from you, so all of them can live their huge incomes over here, have their yachts, everything else, and then by and large, they make sure. Hence why these people don't pay any tax virtually at all. These people don't pay any tax at all either because they just get handouts from this group, and then this group over here pays all the taxes. So at the end of the day, unless you learn to understand foundations, offshore structures, offshore companies, learning things like that, you basically are the milking cow to fund this thing here. So I'm curious who here is actually really serious in a practical sense of taking whatever steps it takes to start moving towards here to increase your income and protect your wealth and get an actual plan B. So you start to be there. Yeah, quite a few of you. Okay, great. Because at the end of the day, you could be in this category over here in the awake category and still know. Like I know, for example, am I in that one right now exactly? No, but I would definitely say I'm at the very top of this circle over here. So for me, I've worked out my way to live like these people while staying within here and being quite okay with that one. And that's the secret. There are ways you can set yourself up legally. You don't have to do dodgy stuff. You don't have to go and do some dodgy underground tax minimization scheme and hope you don't get caught. You don't have to get in the dodgy investment schemes or anything like that. You just get educated and get wise and learn from the mistakes of people who've gone before you and lost money. And I've lost a lot of money, and others in our Global Wealth Club have made plenty of mistakes. So that's how the money really flows in the matrix. So hopefully everyone's getting some idea how this matrix works. And this matrix here, they will tax you as employees or self-employed. The business owners have to work long hours. You'll find that they get locked down. Well, if you notice the businesses over here miraculously seem to escape the lockdowns and escape all kinds of stuff. They manage to avoid wearing masks because they don't want to apply these rules to themselves. They only want to apply it to this group here, keep this group obedient and keep this group paying basically the system to keep going. The Sovereign Individual book written in 1995 talks about that. It said that basically that as civilization collapses and governments start running out of money, they've got bigger debts to pay. And the Australian government have got over $1 trillion now in borrowed debt. They've got to pay their interest on their loans through this group here. And believe you me, the banks are coming at the governments and wanting them to start making payments back and calling in their loans. And the governments know they've got to keep the payments coming through. That's why they're clamping down on regulation. That's why they're bringing in stricter laws. That's why they're cracking down more on their indoctrinated and sit on the fence, especially with various audits. They're auditing now more tax agents, doctors, everyone else to get these groups compliant, get this group to make sure they keep funding the system while it's collapsing. Because believe you me, this group does not want the system to collapse. They want it to keep going. So this is where the Great Reset and what they're working towards. So everyone in this category eventually will simply fall into this, and 95% will basically depend on 5% and keep them funded. So is there a way out? There certainly is, but you have to basically get yourself educated and be in for the long haul. And it doesn't matter where you're at, you know. You can be at the smallest level, you know, so to speak, but the journey of 1,000 miles starts with one step and things like that. So in terms of what is next for tier 2 people, is at the end of the day, I see ahead for most people in this second tier what happened with the pandemic. Many got caught totally by surprise. They woke up and just like that, they were locked down. Just like that, they couldn't leave. Just like that, they couldn't work in their jobs anymore and have income. I see that day coming in this here. Just like that one, they will wake up and realize that the system's being reset, the system's being changed. A big crash is happening in record time and they don't know when people want to move. Suddenly their properties, everyone's wanting to sell their property at the same time. And of course, they've either got to take an incredibly low price or basically just wait and then have a debt now to pay on their property. Because right now people are borrowing like crazy because the market's going up and interest rates are at a record low. So what I really see is eventually people losing what they have and not being able to do it. Now, so is everyone seeing what I'm saying here? Just type a Y if you're getting the drift of where I'm coming from. Yeah, everyone. Yeah, so basically, it's really about learning to structure yourself and get your plan B so you're not basically vulnerable in things like that. So right now, the reality is people are very, 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 very vulnerable. So really, hence, which is why what we're going to be doing at the end of April, we're going to be doing a special event. Now, what I might do is just, Ed, have you got the link for the event? Just to mention that as well, because I want to share a little bit about what we're going to be doing in that event, because this is kind of like what I call a fast track and things like that. So yeah, protect your assets from seizure. So what we're doing is a special event on this area, okay? And like I said, as you know, most of our webinars on Tuesday and Wednesday night, we don't really ever sell anything. We just kind of talk and share. This one, I'm making no apologies that we're going to offer this event. And the reason we're going to charge for this event is because we actually want people who are really serious, because this event's going to teach some of our best stuff of me, Stephen, and Virgil, who some of you have heard before, who's an expert in gold, silver. He's been telling me how the people from the Canada protests have been frantically moving their money into Singapore to protect it from the fact that suddenly, Trudeau passed those laws and freezing bank accounts for protests and things like that. We see more of it happening for people in tier 2. People who don't conform, who don't get jabbed, who don't do what they're told, will wake up one day and can't get certain things. So we're really going to bring out our best stuff. And on top of that, we're going to show you practical steps as well. So this is really going to be for action takers, this event. People who are willing to put some money in, invest in doing this really, really well and taking some action. So it's not just to sit there and listen to a webinar so much. We're also going to be showing some advanced residual income strategies and how to do it safely. That's the other thing we're going to be doing as well. Because at the end of the day, we all would agree it's great to protect what you've got. But I think the biggest thing that's bothering people from what we're noticing is just their vulnerability on their income streams, which means that they know full well if their employer, if government does certain things, they're in trouble. So we'll be really teaching about that kind of stuff and things that are being done, things that people are doing, and how to do that. What we're doing as well is we're giving an early bird discount at the end of January. It's going to be a day and a half. It'll be fully recorded. What will happen is that if you type in that code, you'll get 20% off, and it's going to be before Friday. So it's $497 for the event, but basically 20% off, which means it's effectively around $397 or $399, so to speak. So basically, this is going to be, like I said, a practical event with action to be able to really take these steps. So it'll be showing you the steps to actually begin the path of moving into the tier 1. So the purpose of the event is to help you understand the tier 1 a lot better than you will now, on how to make the step where you start that journey to move from maybe the bottom of that circle, where you move up the circle more towards the top of the circle. So, and eventually for some of you, even get into this sphere. But at the very least, even if you're in this sphere, you're living like you're in this sphere. For those of you who are near, to help you move from here into here, so you really know what to do and get a plan. And like I said, it doesn't really matter where you basically are at in your journey. It starts with doing something. Because we all would agree, if you end up doing something rather than freezing right now, even if you don't get everything in place that you'd like before this all happens, you'll be in a better place than you would be if you do nothing. So we're also going to, for those who live in Perth as well, we're actually going to have people can come face-to-face as well. So we've got a face-to-face as well as live streaming this whole event. So although it's a live streamed webinar or an event, we're also going to have, people can come face-to-face, and it's going to be, for those living in Perth, at a small event venue, or if it's a small enough numbers, might even just be at my place. So, okay, any questions? And just type in the text chat, who's interested in coming to this event and actually being part of this? Just type a Y if you genuinely are interested in doing that. A few, good. I'd really encourage you to do that. I mean, I spent a lot more, thousands of dollars to go to these kind of events and do it. I had to fly to Hong Kong and spend a huge amount of money to go and do this many, many years ago. So we're really doing this, and like I said, if I could have got something like this 8 years ago, it would have been amazing. So, okay, so any questions that people have got as well on this, on what I've spoken about today, about the event? Like I said, I didn't want to do a long one tonight. And like I said, it's not for everyone. I really just want serious people who just want to take action. If you just want to listen to an event, just keep coming to our free stuff, enjoy that. It's a gift from us to you. But just to help people at least, feel okay and a little bit comforted. But for those who actually want to take some real practical action, that's who this event's for. So no point wasting your money if you don't plan to do that. That's my honest comment. I would rather you spend your money on Netflix or going to buy a whole lot of movie programs. Suzanne, how do you go about joining the GWC as a member? Yeah, well, look, Jasmine and team, you guys can answer that. You can kind of put something there, and you basically go to the site and book in for a free call with Jasmine, and she can have a chat with you, Suzanne. But maybe, Jasmine, you can throw something in there in the chat, or one of the team. Darlene, you have to be a big income earner to move up through the ranks. Look, I like what Kiyosaki said. Often the biggest income earners are the most vulnerable because they're so used to a big lifestyle of expenses, they can be in a lot of strife because their income is dependent. When I was a lawyer, Darlene, I was in a lot of trouble because my income depended on me complying with the system. When I got out of favor with them, I spent 3 years, fighting the legal practice board. So that's why I walked away from the legal profession, because I realized I was totally vulnerable. So income streams are starting somewhere. Someone who can create, say, hypothetically, a $1,000 a week or $2,000 a week residual income stream is in a far better place than, say, somebody earning $800,000 a year but working in a job where they've got to go into an office, they've got to do what the employer tells them, and and then the employer, for example, is going to force them to wear masks, get jabbed, or do whatever kinds of stuff they want to do. So that's why so really you can build your income very quick if you do it the right way. It's kind of like, to me, starting off in the gym. Like, I remember years ago, I decided I wanted to get really big. I went to the gym, I was pushing weights and building up, and then I injured myself. I injured my back, and it really put me out for a while. And I did it a couple of times. And in the end, I went back to absolute basics. I found a brilliant, like elite Pilates instructor who trains all the Dockers players. And she started me from bare basics, literally, and built me up. So it took a longer process. Now, today, I was told that my performance on this particular exercise, she said, you're actually stronger than all my AFL elite athletes. None of them can do what you just did on this particular, hip and glute strengthening. So I'm like one of her strongest clients now, and I'm stronger than most of her elite athletes. Now, that took me 2.5 years to get there. But the reason why was I kept showing up. I just kept going. When I first started, I was fairly weak. I had some injuries. I was scared with my body. I had so much injuries with sciatica and back and everything else, and neck and shoulders. But bit by bit, I did it. So it doesn't matter where you're at. In fact, we'd rather people in the club who are really starting out but are hungry and will do whatever it takes and will build and do everything that we show you. Because literally in 3 years' time, 2 years' time, you won't know yourself. You'll build your income the right way. The worst way to build income, as I told my kids, and all of them have followed me, is to go out, go and get a degree and try and get a job and get some kind of qualification. That's what you're all taught. I said the problem with that is that when that world falls apart, and unless you go and get jabbed and be woke and basically say that men can have babies, you're basically pretty much, screwed from your career. So I said, you're better off to do it the right way. Learn to build incomes online. Learn to build business online. Learn to do this kind of stuff. It's a harder way to go. You'll make less money in the beginning, but in the long run, you'll make more money at the end. So that's my comment on that one. It's just when I first started investing heavily in this, I found every spare cent I had and put it into it. I remember I'd find 5, 10, 20,000, whatever it took, whatever they asked of me, and just put it in there and went all out. But then I made sure that everything they told me I did. And virtually every time I got a huge return on what I did. So it's also your attitude as well and what you put into it. So any other questions? Like I said, I'm passionate about this right now because, this whole thing's fucked up. I think we would agree. I mean, I just cannot believe what I'm seeing at the moment more and more. I mean, I go out and it's still in West Australia where I live, they're just trying to mask everyone up. And I mean, I was sitting there when I was getting my new car today, and the car guy was saying, they've told us here, I have to get jabbed. And he said, and my partner was sick, and everyone's just saying it's just absolutely terrible. So you can see where this is heading. So any comments or questions? Who's enjoyed this today? Who feels like you've kind of had a bit of a spur up to keep going? So like I said, right now, I feel like that man on the bridge today. I'm like, the more I'm seeing these Russian sanctions and what's going on with Ukraine, I'm just going shaking my head and going no, this is going to go bad. And I want to yell as loud as I can, and hopefully some people will listen. So Matt says, how long do you think before the shit really hits the fan? Well, like what Stephen said, I think it already has. I think that's the reality, Matt. You actually see the signs everywhere. If you look at Novak Djokovic coming in here and literally diplomatic passport, proper exemption, still gets kicked out just because the government say they don't like him going against the narrative. That's basically stuff similar to China. You've got that happening already. You've already got cancel culture. You've got woke culture. You've got people pretty much doctors being openly threatened. Yeah, Joe, like Squid Game. Yeah, openly being threatened. Yeah, it's like a big game. I actually wrote a Facebook post yesterday, Joe, and I said it's like being in a big video game. And you got the evil masked police, you got the jab bandits, and you've got the evil secret politicians who are there trying to steal all your money, you know, and your aim is to beat them. You know, you want to be the one who beats them. So far I'm winning, you know, but I know that the challenges are getting bigger now. I know that the levels in the video game have just gone up a notch. And I know that at bigger levels, you have worse enemies and it's harder to beat them. So that's where we're at now. And as Cappy said, they've achieved a lot in these 2 to 3 years. And what bothers me is not what they're doing. It's the fact that the masses have gone headlong into it. And by and large, people are complying. And that's very, very worrying. I mean, what's worrying is how much people are complying, which tells you they're going to get away with a lot before people push back, if they ever do. That's just the reality. So it's so important to just be taking a lot of actions. I see it's going to get pretty bad. I really do. I think that it's already there, Matt, in answer to your question, but I think especially over the next year, I think this time next year, I can't imagine where we'll be at. I'm predicting by 2025, some kind of reset would have happened, maybe before that, by about then. So, Vicky, why do you think the restrictions have been lifted in other countries and not here? Look, it's a good question. And I think very simply that by and large, once they got their 70, 80% jabbed, they had got what they were looking for. And so they lifted their restrictions. Australia, phase 1 finished. Australia, the politicians almost become like a competition, alpha male, alpha female ego trip. They're almost trying to outdo each other in how many jabbings they get at people. Like Mark McGowan proudly boasting about 90% or whatever shit they pull out of their asses. So it's almost like become a competition over here. And plus Australia has been a testing ground for New World Order. So Australia, Lorraine says, will we be more draconian than elsewhere? I think just look at how we've handled a pandemic compared to everyone else. We've been much worse. We've been locking our citizens up, not letting them leave the country. I think we'll be much worse. I think we'll eventually, people won't be able to send money out of Australia at all. Any wires that come in will be carefully scrutinised. I think if you don't meet certain criteria, I think you'll get very bad over here. I think eventually they'll, I think that whatever you can imagine, worst case scenario, they'll do over here, because if the way they've handled the flu over the last 2 years an indication, and they've almost made it an ego trip, like I said, with the whole jab. That's why Australia haven't lifted their restrictions as near as much. I mean, some of the stuff just still blows my mind, and that's what I'm like, no, this is shocking. I mean, many who know me know I've predicted what was going to happen very accurately. But I mean, even I was taken by complete surprise with the insanity with the jab. Like, I always believed they would coerce everyone into it heavily, but they let people make a choice. Where they've openly here mandated it in certain industries, I didn't see that one coming, I'll be honest. I got that, I missed that one. And Kerry says, Bill Gates proudly says the world should copy what we've done in future pandemics. Exactly. So, yep, I think there's some challenges ahead, and you want to be ready for it, and you want to be part of a good community and taking the necessary action steps in place. So someone's asked about my view on the Russian-Ukraine war, a true prolonged war. Look, I'm surprised how long Ukraine have lasted, but in saying that, I think NATO is helping them a lot. To me, wars never end well. I doubt Putin's got to wake up one day and say sorry and go back to normal life. I think there's a reasonable chance it's going to end up in war, and possibly it's going to extend to NATO. I think there'll be a lot of pressure by the media put on NATO to intervene, and eventually they'll do it. And eventually you'll start having nukes flying. I think there's a chance that could happen. I hope I'm wrong, but I do think it's a possibility. So we've got to be ready for that. Lorraine says, less COVID here. Well, it doesn't make sense. Well, does any of this make sense? I mean, when you're in a lunatic asylum, I don't know if you've ever worked with people who are lunatics, Lorraine, but nothing they do makes sense. So we're living in a lunatic asylum. People are not rational. They're not thinking. Having rational conversations is almost impossible right now. And I'm sure you'd all agree. So, and our politicians are anything but rational at the moment. It's just a big ego thing. So yeah, it's important to be doing that. So today, like I said, was a bit of a wake up, more in your face kind of message than I normally give. And it's really because honestly, I love to see people move from there into there and start that process a bit faster and just see what we can do to help as many people as they possibly can. So, thanks everyone. So just as a final reminder, if you could just put the link back in the chat again, team, for the event. Like I said, the early birds open until Friday. So after that, it'll revert to the normal $4.97. Just another comment, if you're already a member of the Global Wealth Club, depending on your membership level, there are discounts that are given to members, or, you know, in some cases at the higher levels, you know, like they're bigger discounts or whatever. So basically, yeah, so if you're already a member and you're keen to come, just reach out to our team and they will assist you to make sure before Friday you get the deal that's going to be for you. I've got here, Robin, the crazies of Lismore, New South Wales being flooded again. Yeah, well, that flooding's crazy. I've got friends who live over there, and Byron Bay was completely in the water today. So I don't know if that was a genuine flood or if there's climate manipulation happening, but something weird's going on. So just put the link in with the, again. Okay, I don't know why we haven't had the link put in there, but I'll put it in here myself. So basically, yeah. Any final questions, anyone, before we end today? Peter, when do you think gate will open to fly for unvaxxed? Goodness me, I have no idea on that one. I think that what I'm noticing is that it seems to keep varying, Peter. You know, it just seems to keep varying around, like places open and shut again. I think certain airlines will open up and things like that. So that's a good question, Bo. I am noticing, though, that some places now in Australia, when I checked into it, you can, for example, leave Australia now and go internationally and come back quite easily now. You can actually fly whether you're jabbed or unjabbed. But, you know, you just when you come back with certain isolation restrictions for unjabbed that aren't for others. But that's my understanding. Robin, what do you think of what was said about Scott Morrison, the Senate? I don't know what you're talking about, to be honest, on that one. So you have to fill me in a bit more, Robin. I don't actually have any idea what was said. There's these things flying around in the media all the time. But who's enjoyed today? Who's found it quite helpful? Or maybe just give a word of whether you inspired, enjoyed it, whether you enjoyed that more direct approach, things like that. And who's ready to take some real action? Awesome, great. So it looks like a few people liked it. And yeah, look, at the end of the day, the best way you could really show you like it is taking action and starting to put things in place and move things. And I appreciate everyone coming and listening and just the effort that people have been doing. I know most of you have taken some really good action in your time. And look forward to seeing some of you at the club at our ongoing events. You're welcome to keep coming to our free events. We look forward to keep seeing you. And for those of you ready to take action, we look forward to really helping you make that acceleration from the tier 2 into the tier 1. So thanks, everyone, and we look forward to seeing you next time.